name's Christian.Williams. I'm a professional athlete from Australia, and I first met Ric Shuttleworth when I was working at the Australian Institute of Sport. And I just come off a successful career playing lacrosse on a national team. I was also on the Winter Olympic development squad for luge in the Winter Olympics. But injuries, and I had a very bad heart condition, which meant that my ability to train or do anything aerobic was compromised, forced me to retire from several sports. And I thought my only chance of ever getting to the Olympics would be to become an archer. It was a sport that I'd never done before. I'd never even seen a bow or an arrow. So I thought the best way to do it, and same as learning any new skill, was to find an expert. So I went on Google and I found an Olympic gold medalist who was the head coach at the Australian Institute of Sport, Simon. So I gave him a call and I pretty much begged him to give me a chance. So I flew up to Canberra and had no idea what I was doing, and was given a rubber band and said, if you want to practice archery, you've got to practice your technique. So the condition of me, having a chance was for, 3 months. I had to get a rubber TheraBand, practice archery technique in front of a mirror, and videotape myself for about an hour every day and send it to my coach in Canberra. And we did this for a long time, and I used my background skills from other sports to try and find the best and quickest effective way to become a good archer. Now, all I did was I studied relentlessly, looking at the competition. I looked at the top archers from Korea around the world. Looked at archers with my same wingspan, my same physical attributes, and I found a timing sequence that worked. And I was very lucky that I got to meet Ric in the skill acquisition department, because I was in a hurry. I wanted to learn the skill as quickly as possible with no background information at all. So an app we used was to come up with a timing sequence where it would beep and let me know the optimal shooting sequence for the top 10 archers in the world. So I timed my shot to that, and I'd practice even in my head. I'd put in my iPhone and I'd have my timing sequence, and I'd do that. And I'd do it with a rubber band, or do it with a fake band in front of a mirror, and then I'd actually do that out on the shooting range. Now, I was very lucky that in that first 6 months of preparation, it's kind of like GPP, in the gym. It was all about preparing myself physically for the fact that my shoulders, I couldn't externally rotate them. I couldn't rotate my elbows. So to get into, an optimal shooting stance. So I spent a lot of time working on that. Spent a lot of time working on the suppleness in my fingers, because the release of archery, it all comes down to being able to release the string off your fingers. So I studied key piano players, and I spoke to a couple of heart surgeons, because I wanted to get the finger dexterity. So I practiced with rubber bands and tying knots in my hands, because that's what surgeons did. And one of my heart surgeons showed me this is what I'll do to seal up a valve in a heart. So if that's how you get the dexterity to do these fine motor skills, surely that would help me, be better prepared to do the fine motor skills I need to do with my archery. So what I did was I practiced that for my hand strength. I spoke to the Australian sailing team about how I can read the wind better, because that's one thing that determines, the difference between shooting a 10 and shooting a 7 is how I react to the wind. So I did as much as I could trying to understand the variables of wind and timing and how to read the wind. When it came back to my physical conditioning, make sure I had the strength in reserve to pull back a heavy bow. The heavier the bow is, the faster the arrow is, and less it's affected by the wind. So it really came down to breaking down the key skill that I needed to do in the sport and finding as many creative ways as possible to hit those attributes. So I had, I was training, 5 or 6 sessions a day, working on my agility, on my mental agility, because I would get bored. Like, archery for me wasn't the most exciting sport, but it was my job. I wanted to go to the Olympics. And Ric introduced me to the whole concept of, perturbations in your training. I would shoot with 1 foot in hot water, 1 foot in cold water, crazy things. I'd have a shower wearing my full clothing, and then I'd go out and shoot, just to know that if it ever rained or ever got wet, that I'd be able to perform in suboptimal conditions. Whether it was, if I could find the worst weather possible, that's when I'd shoot with the worst lighting, with the best lighting. I'd get my sisters, to annoy me and poke me and throw Skittles at me when I was training. Just every possible perturbation I could think of to make sure that my skill was robust as possible. So that way I knew that when I came into competition, I'd be fine. So I have a great deal of gratitude towards meeting Ric, because his ideas and his philosophies on training and making sure that, having a skill set that is so robust you can execute it no matter what the external circumstances, was the best thing that ever happened to me. In my first 6 months in the sport, I never actually shot any arrows, but within my first 2 weeks of actually shooting at a competition distance of 70 meters, I was 3 points off an Olympic qualifying minimum, which for me I was pretty proud of. And I would have been able to do it without Ric, because just the philosophy of looking at a skill as just a small part of the sport, and all the physical attributes and every possible skill that you could need to be an archer, I looked at individually and incorporated them into my own training program. So I hope that example helps. If you want to find me, please send me an email, but I can't recommend Ric Shuttleworth highly enough. He's an expert at what he does, and I wouldn't have been successful as I was without him. Oh, and I didn't make it to the Olympics because my heart gave out again. So thanks for listening. Hope that helped, and cheers.
He'll make the Olympics, but you'd never count out a guy who's done so much, and by the way, can shoot an apple off a human head with one shot. It's not like I don't trust you, but I'll wear this. You cool with that?
It's all good, man. The government trusts me, so can you.
Never doubted you, Christian. Even got a spare apple.